Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are tackling an amazing piece about resilience and perspective, and really the power of believing in yourself. It's kind of like getting advice from a good friend,
Mm.
but with insightful stories and, yeah, metaphors too.
It's funny you should say that because this piece really does feel like that, like a pep talk about how to take those moments when you feel like you're starting from scratch and turn them into opportunities.
Right. And the author calls this the law of broken crayons, which really got me thinking. It's this idea that we almost never have everything we think we need right away when we start something new. But we do have something, and that's enough to begin.
Totally. We often get stuck in this feeling of like, not enough. We put things off and wait for the perfect time or for the perfect whatever before we even start. But, this piece really pushes back against that.
It's like that box of crayons we all had as kids.
Right.
Some were broken, some were worn down to nubs, but we didn't let that stop us from creating.
Yeah, and that's the whole point. We got to embrace those broken crayons, those things we see as limitations, and realize they don't have to hold us back. In fact, they can even become our strengths.
Love it. The author uses this great analogy about starting a business. They quote Alex Hormozy, who says it's like running a marathon out of shape and getting in shape along the way.
So true. It doesn't matter what challenge you pick, you learn and grow as you go. That perfect starting point that we all dream about sometimes. It's honestly usually an illusion that keeps us stuck.
There's this other point they make about how people react to criticism. Some people just shut down, but others, the author uses Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant as examples. They use criticism as fuel to get better.
It all comes back to that internal dialogue we have with ourselves, right? It's not what happens to us that matters most, but what we tell ourselves about it. We can choose whether we see criticism as a setback or as a challenge to overcome.
Okay, so then how do we shift that internal dialogue? How do we become more like a Michael Jordan who takes criticism and turns it into motivation?
The author talks about becoming more aware of the stories we're telling ourselves. Like, are we focusing on all the ways we aren't enough? Or are we choosing to see our strengths and our potential?
That makes me think of the potato, the egg, and the coffee bean analogy from the piece.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So they're all tossed into boiling water, but they all react differently.
What?
The potato gets all soft and weak. And the egg gets hard and unyielding. But the coffee beans, well, they actually transform the water into something new.
Such a vivid image. So for our listeners out there, the ones who might be struggling with something right now, what can they learn from this? How can they be more like the coffee bean?
I think it comes down to realizing that challenges can either break us down or refine us, make us stronger. The coffee beans don't just survive the boiling water, right? They use it to make something better. It's about, looking for the opportunity in the challenge, asking yourself, how can I use this experience to grow?
And the author actually shares their own experiences with embodying those different reactions at different points in their life.
Which really shows that we're not static. We're always changing. We can learn and adapt even from those tough times.
One of the biggest takeaways for me was that helplessness, like feeling helpless, it's a choice. We have a lot more control over our lives than we think we do.
You got it. We're not just pawns in some big game, right? We have agency. We can choose to look for solutions, to see the possibilities, even when it feels really tough.
The author tells this amazing story about a deaf frog that escapes from a pit, and he escapes because he can't hear the other frogs telling him it's impossible.
I love that story. It shows how powerful it can be to tune out the negative voices, those voices telling us we can't do something, and instead follow our own inner compass.
Yeah, it's about trusting our own intuition even when everyone else is telling us to give up. And speaking of believing in ourselves, the author also talks about how sometimes just hanging on, that's a form of success.
Persistence can be the thing that sets you apart when it feels like everything's stacked against you. It can be the difference between reaching your goal and falling short.
They even bring up that quote from Thomas Edison about people giving up right before their breakthrough.
Sometimes just keeping going, even when it's tough, that can be what sparks the breakthrough. It's about not giving up on ourselves.
They also talk about embracing vulnerability and rejecting safety. What did you think about that part?
Well, the author's point is that playing it safe, like always staying in your comfort zone, it can lead to regrets later. It's like choosing to watch your life happen instead of actually living it. Real growth and feeling fulfilled, it comes from stepping outside that comfort zone.
So what's the way to break free from that playing it safe mindset?
It starts with looking at fear differently. The author uses some great quotes from Seneca and Mark Twain, and they suggest that we should look at fear not as something to avoid, but as a sign that we're on the right path toward growth.
So we should see fear as a sign that we're pushing ourselves to grow and not something to be scared of.
Exactly. When we look at challenges as opportunities, fear becomes like a guidepost that points us toward our full potential. It's all about understanding that growth comes with discomfort, right? They go together.
I love that. It's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. But how do we actually do that?
The author suggests taking small steps. What's one little thing you can do today that pushes you outside your comfort zone, even just a tiny bit?
Great advice. It's like building up your courage one small step at a time.
And remember, you don't have to have everything figured out perfectly to start. That's the beauty of the law of broken crayons. Start creating now with what you already have.
And sometimes those broken crayons end up being the most interesting ones to use, don't they?
You know it. They give your creation more depth and texture and make it unique. They remind us that perfection isn't the point. It's about embracing the imperfections and using them to make something real, something meaningful.
And speaking of real and meaningful, the author shares this really personal story about a time when they felt completely lost and defeated. They described their world as feeling colorless and bland because they weren't connecting with their passion for storytelling anymore.
It shows that even the most creative, driven people out there, they have moments of doubt too. It's what we do in those moments that really matters.
And what happened? Well, they got this email that totally snapped them out of it. Someone wanted to make a documentary about their life, about how disciplined and productive they were.
Yeah.
Pretty ironic, right? Because they were feeling anything but disciplined and productive at that point.
That irony was what triggered this big realization for them. They had let their circumstances define who they were. That email was like a wake-up call. They could choose a different story.
And that's exactly what they did. They started noticing all the color and beauty around them again. The green of the palm trees, the blue sky, the red of their running shoes.
It's like a metaphor for how our perspective can completely change just by choosing to focus on the good things and being present in the moment.
It's like they literally started seeing the world in color again. And I think that's a great place for us to pause for now. We've talked about a lot in this first part of our deep dives, and I want to give everyone a chance to let it sink in a bit.
For sure. We've gone over some big ideas: the law of broken crayons, the power of perspective, embracing vulnerability. It's a lot to process.
So take some time to think about what we've talked about. Think about how it connects with you and how you might use it in your own life. And we're back, diving deeper into this law of broken crayons thing. Let's talk about how we can actually use this idea about limitations in our daily lives.
Yeah, good point. We were just talking about, our inner dialogue and how it can shape our reality. And it made me think of something else the author said about how we tend to rush through our own lives, always focused on the next goal, the next thing. But then when we watch a good movie, we savor every scene.
That's so true. It's like we let ourselves be present and in the moment when it's a story, but not so much with our own experiences. Kind of strange when you think about it.
Yeah, the author is all about intentionality.
Yeah.
Like, we can choose how we experience our lives, just like we choose to be present when we're, engrossed in a movie.
So instead of just going through the motions, on autopilot, we can be more aware, more present, and actually create those movie-worthy moments for ourselves every day.
That's it. And that's where the law of broken crayons comes in. Instead of focusing on what we don't have or what's wrong, we can choose to appreciate the stuff we do have, our experiences. We can use those broken crayons to make something beautiful and meaningful.
I really like how the author makes it clear that we're always creating, even if we don't realize it. Every choice we make, everything we do, it's like adding to this big painting of our lives.
It is, isn't it? We're not just watching our lives happen. We're the ones making it happen, shaping the story, choosing the colors, creating the whole thing.
That's pretty powerful. But what about when we feel stuck? Like when we know what we want to create, but we have no clue how to get there.
The author talks about that too. They share this story about a time when they felt totally lost, no direction. They describe it as this gray period where they lost their passion and their purpose. It's a good reminder that even those people who seem to have it all figured out, even they go through tough times.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of comforting, right? It's not just me. So what happened? How'd they get unstuck?
Well, they got this email that completely changed things for them. Someone wanted to make a documentary about their life, about their discipline and how productive they were. Pretty ironic, considering how undisciplined and unproductive they were feeling at the time.
Whoa, that is ironic. Sounds like a real turning point.
Yeah.
What'd they learn from that whole thing?
It was a wake-up call, They realized they had been letting their circumstances control how they saw themselves, and they had a choice. Keep feeling sorry for themselves, or focus on the good stuff, the things they were grateful for.
And they went with the second option, right? The positive one? Like they started seeing the world in color again, literally. The green palm trees, the blue sky, the red of their running shoes.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how much our perspective matters. Even when things are tough, we can choose what we focus on.
It's like our reality isn't set in stone, right? We get to create it.
I like that. And the author encourages us to really own that, to live with intention on purpose.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we start creating a reality that we, actually love?
They suggest starting by, recognizing that we have the power to choose our perspective. So instead of focusing on what's missing or what's broken, we can look at the things we do have, those experiences and strengths that make each of us unique.
Right, it's about taking those broken crayons and making something awesome with them, not treating them like they're holding us back. But what about fear? I mean, a lot of times that's what stops us from chasing our dreams, isn't it?
They have some good thoughts about fear, too. They say that helplessness, that feeling of being helpless, it's a choice. We can focus on the stuff we can control, our attitude, our actions, how we see things. And when we do that, a lot more becomes possible.
So instead of letting fear freeze us in place, we can take action, keep moving forward, even if we don't have all the answers right now.
That's the idea. And sometimes taking action is the best way to find those answers. They actually challenge what most people think of as success. They suggest that sometimes hanging on, just not quitting, is a form of success.
Like that Thomas Edison quote, "Many of life's failures are people who didn't realize how close they were to success when they gave up."
So true. We underestimate our own resilience a lot. We give up right before the breakthrough happens. And maybe, just maybe, hanging on is what makes that breakthrough happen.
They have this other point about fear that I found really interesting. They say that fear can actually be a good thing, like a signpost that points us toward growth.
Yeah, it's like that whole feel the fear and do it anyway thing. Fear might be telling us that we're on the right path, that we're moving out of our comfort zone and into, somewhere new where anything is possible.
So instead of running from fear, we should see it as a signal that we're pushing ourselves to grow and evolve.
You got it. Growth and discomfort, they kind of go hand in hand, right? And sometimes the scariest things are the ones that can set us free. Like that story about the deaf frog who escaped the pit.
Oh yeah, I love that story. He escaped because he couldn't hear all the other frogs telling him he couldn't do it. It's like a perfect example of how powerful it is to just tune out all that negativity and trust your gut, your own intuition.
Right. Sometimes the biggest obstacle we face is all that negative stuff we've absorbed from other people. We got to learn to believe in ourselves even when other people don't. Listen to that little voice inside that says, "You got this," even when the doubts start creeping in. But, it's normal to have doubts.
Of course. Doubts and fears, they're part of being human. The key is not letting them stop us.
Yeah.
Not letting them define us.
Yeah, the author wants us to see fear as a sign that we're on the right path, that we're growing, not as something to be afraid of. And it's okay if we don't have every single answer figured out. It's okay to not have the perfect plan.
That takes a lot of pressure off, honestly. It's about embracing the unknown and having faith that the right path will appear as we keep moving. But sometimes it feels so overwhelming, especially when it seems like everything's going wrong at once. How do we stop ourselves from getting bogged down by all that brokenness?
The author talks about that too. They say that we often try to fix everything all at once, which just makes us feel more overwhelmed and discouraged. A better approach is to focus on taking one little step at a time. Like, what's one thing you can do today with what you already have to get a little closer to your goal?
That's good advice. He's like breaking down those huge, scary goals into smaller steps that are easier to handle. And it all comes back to that broken crayons idea. We don't have to wait for the perfect moment or for all the right tools to show up. We can start now with what we've got.
And sometimes those broken crayons, they turn out to be the most interesting and valuable tools in the box. They add something special to whatever we're creating, and they remind us that perfection isn't what we should be aiming for. It's about using what we have, imperfections and all, to create something real.
I like that. Our imperfections, they're not holding us back. They're what make each of us special. And when we accept them, it's like giving ourselves permission to be ourselves, to really express our creativity.
Exactly. That's where the magic happens. When we're being genuine, showing all of who we are, even the messy parts, that's when we can really shine.
You know what? This whole conversation is really making me think about my own broken crayons and how I can use them to make something even better, even more meaningful with my life.
I'm feeling that too. We all have that power to create a life we love. And it starts with, with embracing who we are, all of it, the good and the not so good.
Well, I think we've covered a ton in this part of our deep dive. Let's take a quick break to let all of this sink in. We'll be right back for the last part of our exploration into the law of broken crayons. All right, we're back for the final part of our Law of Broken Crayons deep dive. Let's talk about putting all this good stuff into action and making some real changes, like building a life we're actually excited about.
I think we should pick up where we left off, talking about embracing those imperfections and really using what we have to make something that matters. The author takes that idea a step further and challenges us to look at safety differently.
Yeah.
They actually say that playing it safe can lead to regrets and missed opportunities down the road.
Yeah, it's like choosing to just watch your life go by instead of actually, living it.
But how do we break free from that? How do we stop playing it safe? They use this analogy of watching life happen through a window.
Right.
You're comfortable, you're safe, but you're not really out there experiencing it. Real growth, feeling fulfilled, that comes from being in the game, not watching from the sidelines.
So how do we get off the sidelines, so to speak? How do we face those moments that feel kind of scary but also really exciting?
Well, the author talks about reframing how we see fear. They bring up some quotes from Seneca and Mark Twain, and they suggest that we should look at fear not as something to be avoided, but as a sign that we're on the right track, that we're about to grow.
So instead of letting fear stop us in our tracks, we should look at it as a sign that we're pushing ourselves to become better.
Right. When we see challenges as opportunities, fear becomes like a compass, It points us toward our potential. It's about understanding that growth, real growth, usually comes with some discomfort.
That makes me think about something else they talk about, redefining our reality. They say the way we see the world isn't fixed, like it's something we're creating with our thoughts and our actions.
Yeah, they use this comparison to watching a movie. When we watch a movie, we really savor each scene. We get immersed in the story. But with our own lives, we often rush through, always looking ahead to the next big thing.
We're robbing ourselves of experiencing our own story fully.
Right. They want us to change that, to start living like we're in this amazing movie full of adventure and meaning.
Okay, that sounds amazing, but how do we actually do that? How do we go from rushing through life to actually, enjoying the moment?
By being more mindful about how we experience our lives, choosing to be present in each moment, appreciating the little things, finding those moments of joy in everyday life.
It's not about the destination, it's about the journey, and realizing that the journey itself is where the good stuff happens.
Yeah. And remember, that journey's not going to be perfect, There will be bumps along the way, tough times. But those are the things that make it an adventure, a story worth telling.
The author shares a personal story about feeling totally lost and defeated, like they had lost their passion and purpose.
Yeah.
They describe it as this black and white time in their life.
Yeah, and then they had this realization, this big aha moment. They got an email from someone who wanted to make a documentary about them, about their discipline and how productive they were.
Oh, wow. That's pretty ironic, right? Considering how they were feeling at that time.
Totally. But that irony, that's what made them wake up. They saw how they were letting their circumstances define them, and they decided to take back control, to create their own story.
So they stopped dwelling on the bad stuff and started focusing on the good stuff, the possibilities.
Exactly. They started seeing the little things, the green palm trees, the blue sky, the red of their running shoes. Like, they literally started seeing the world in color again.
It's a great reminder that we always have the power to shift our perspective, even when things are tough. We're not stuck with whatever reality is in front of us. We have a say in creating it.
Yeah, and they encourage us to really grab hold of that, to live our lives on purpose.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave everyone with a question. What's one tiny step you can take today with the resources you have right now to get a little closer to something you want, something that feels really challenging?
Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you have all the answers. Just take that first step and trust that the rest will come.
Embrace those so-called broken crayons that make you who you are and use them to make something amazing.
Believe in yourself. Have faith in the process and keep moving forward. You got this.